It was supposed to be just another elegant evening, a celebration filled with laughter, music, and polite conversation. The kind of party where people dress to impress and everything feels a bit too perfect. But what happened that night would be talked about long after the lights dimmed and the last glass was emptied. She walked in quietly, a simple woman with a gentle smile, dressed modestly among a crowd that sparkled in designer labels. Right away, whispers followed her like shadows. Her soft voice and plain clothes made her an easy target. Some smirked, others chuckled. A few didn't even bother to hide their remarks. They called her outdated, too plain, even boring, though none of them had spoken more than 2 words to her. She stood beside her husband, who was polite but reserved, quietly observing everything. No one seemed to understand why someone like him, charming, well-connected, clearly respected, would be with someone so ordinary. The mockery wasn't loud, but it was sharp, hidden behind fake smiles and knowing glances. It was clear. They thought she didn't belong, but they didn't know her story, or his. And what none of them saw coming was what her husband would say when he finally stepped forward. His words would shift the entire mood of the room. Suddenly, the laughter stopped. The prideful faces dropped, and that simple woman, once dismissed and judged, became the center of attention for a reason. No one expected. The party guests weren't ready for the truth. What they thought was just a quiet, simple woman turned out to be someone whose story, and strength, was far deeper than appearances. Just when they thought they knew everything, her husband revealed something that changed everything. But what? Did he say? And why did it leave everyone in stunned silence? Stay with us to find out. The room had gone quiet, but she didn't flinch. The simple woman, who had spent most of the evening standing in the background, kept her calm expression. She wasn't used to parties like this, polished, high society gatherings where every word was calculated and every look meant something. She had grown up in a small town, raised by humble parents who taught her kindness over glamour and character, over appearances. Her life wasn't filled with luxury, but with purpose. When she married him, many were surprised. He was from a different world, well-educated, wealthy, someone who easily fit into the fast-paced lifestyle of the city. People expected him to choose someone who matched the image, someone who fit the mold. Instead, he chose her, not for how she dressed or who she knew, but for her strength, her honesty, and the way she looked at life with clear eyes. Still, no one at the party seemed to understand. A few women exchanged smug glances, whispering behind their glasses of wine. One of them even leaned in and said, half joking, "She must have some secret. No way he married her for love." That comment reached his ears. And it was the moment he stepped forward. Everyone watched as he gently took his wife's hand. There was a tension in the air, like something big was coming. You could see the confusion on the faces of the guests. Why would he make a scene? Why now? And what could he possibly say that would change anything? He looked around the room and his expression changed. It wasn't anger, but something deeper. A quiet strength. That's when he started to speak. But instead of defending her with loud words or arguments, he shared something personal, something no one expected, something that would leave everyone stunned. What was the story he told? And why did it silence even the loudest voices in the room? Keep watching. He cleared his throat softly and looked each guest in the eye before he spoke. "You all seem curious about my wife," he began, his voice calm but steady. "Some of you wonder why I married her. Some even find it amusing." A few people shifted uncomfortably, realizing he had overheard more than they thought. His wife stayed quiet beside him, her eyes lowered, not out of shame but out of quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. He continued, "Let me tell you something none of you know. Before I met her, I was falling apart." That got their attention. This was the man they saw as confident, composed, successful. the kind who always seemed to have it all together. I lost my father. My company was about to collapse, and I was dealing with anxiety so bad I couldn't leave my apartment some days. Murmurs rippled across the room. No one had ever heard him speak like this before. I met her at a grocery store, he said with a faint smile. She didn't know who I was. She just saw someone struggling to find the strength to keep going. It was a moment so ordinary, yet it changed everything for him. He explained how her kindness was the first light he had seen in months, how she had stood by him when there was nothing glamorous or powerful about his life. Still, not everyone in the room looked convinced. One guest, a longtime friend of his, raised an eyebrow and said under his breath, "That doesn't make her special, just lucky." And that's when another layer of the story began to reveal itself. There was more to this woman, more than even the guests could guess. Her past held stories she never spoke of, scars she never showed. And the reason she never talked about them was the same reason she didn't react to the judgment around her. She didn't need to. But what exactly had she gone through? Why did her husband say she saved his life more than once? The truth was just beginning to unfold. The room was hanging on every word now. People who had barely noticed her before were suddenly staring, some in disbelief, others in quiet guilt. Still holding his wife's hand, he looked around and said, "You think she's just a simple woman, but what you don't know is that she's stronger than anyone in this room." His voice, though calm, carried weight. He wasn't just defending her, he was honoring her. One woman, the same who had earlier mocked her outfit, crossed her arms and forced a smile. "Everyone has a past," she said with a shrug. "Doesn't mean it makes them better than anyone else." Her tone was polite, but the meaning was sharp. The tension grew thicker. He didn't argue. Instead, he glanced at his wife, silently asking permission to continue. She nodded, still quiet. "You see," he said, "she didn't just help me get through dark days. She knows darkness in ways most of us can't imagine." The words landed heavily. People exchanged uneasy glances. They were hearing things they never expected to hear at a party like this. She lost her brother in a tragic accident, took care of her mother during her final months with cancer, and when a fire destroyed her childhood home, she was the one who carried her niece out of the flames. Gasps echoed across the room. The party, once buzzing with shallow talk and judgment, had turned into something else entirely. Still, she stood there with the same quiet dignity. She hadn't shared these things before, not because she was hiding, but because she didn't need praise or pity. She lived her truth, even when no one was looking. But this wasn't the full story. There was still one moment, one detail her husband hadn't yet revealed. And it was the one thing that would change everything in that room. What was it? What truth could possibly silence even the most skeptical hearts? Stay with us. The climax is just ahead. Just when the room thought they had heard it all, just when the atmosphere had shifted from judgment to quiet respect, he paused, long enough for everyone to wonder if the story was over. But then he said something that made even the most composed faces drop. "What most of you don't know," he continued, "is that everything I have now, my company, my recovery, even my life, it's all because of her, because she saved me, in more ways than one." There was a ripple of confusion. People leaned in. He took a deep breath. "A year ago, I was in a car accident. You probably heard about it in the news. What no one knew was who pulled me from the wreck." Now the whispers grew. Everyone had heard about the crash. A luxury car flipped, nearly fatal. Photos had circulated for weeks, but the driver had never spoken publicly. He turned to look at his wife. She was the one. She had followed me that day. Not out of suspicion, but because I forgot my phone. She saw the crash happen. While bystanders filmed it, she ran straight into it. No second thought. Eyes widened. The same woman they had mocked for being too plain, too quiet, had risked her life in flames and shattered glass to save him. But then came the second twist. He hesitated before speaking again. And that wasn't even the first time. Years before, we met. She was a volunteer in a small village clinic. She donated anonymously to a child's surgery, the same child who grew up to become the lead developer of my company's biggest tech breakthrough. Gasps. Silence. Disbelief. No one in the room had words. The simple woman wasn't just strong. She had shaped lives, quietly, without recognition. But even now, the full picture wasn't clear. There was still one truth left, the one that tied all of this together, and when it came out, it wouldn't just shift the mood. It would flip everything upside down. What was it? You're about to find out. He looked around the silent room, everyone still processing what they'd just heard. His voice softened, but there was something sharp behind it now. You all judged her based on how she looked, how quietly she stood. You didn't ask her story. You assumed she had none. But the truth is, she's the reason I'm standing, here at all. People shifted in their seats, eyes now fixed on her, not with mockery, but with a mix of awe and regret. The room held its breath as he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. There's one last thing I need to share, he said. A part of her life she never even told me. Until recently. He handed the paper to her, and with a small, understanding nod, she opened it and quietly read it aloud. It was a letter, dated years ago. A thank you note from a young man who had grown up in foster care. He'd written about how a stranger had covered his school fees, sent him birthday cards for 10 years, and encouraged him to believe he was worth something, even when no one else did. That boy grew up, went to college, and eventually applied for a job at her husband's company. And here came the twist. That young man? He was now the company's COO, the same man who had helped save the business during its hardest quarter. And not only had she changed his life, he never even knew it was her until just last week, when the truth quietly came out. The guests were stunned. This simple woman hadn't just saved her husband, she'd quietly built the foundation for everything he had. No applause followed, just a deep, almost sacred silence. And then, from the back of the room, someone began to clap. But it wasn't who anyone expected. And with that, the night took one final, unforgettable turn. The soft clap came from the back corner of the room. Slowly, everyone turned to see who it was. It was the COO himself, the young man from the letter. His eyes were glassy, and his expression held a mixture of shock and gratitude. I never knew, he said, walking forward. All these years I never knew it was you. He stopped in front of her, voice cracking slightly. You didn't just change my life. You gave me one. The room, still heavy with emotion, slowly joined in the applause. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was genuine, full of respect. The kind of applause that says, we were wrong, and we finally see you. For the first time that night, the woman smiled fully. Not shy or unsure, but proud, in her own quiet way. She didn't need to say anything. Her story had already spoken louder than any words ever could. As the evening wound down, the energy in the room had completely shifted. The ones who had mocked her earlier now approached with softer eyes, offering apologies and awkward attempts at kindness. She accepted them with grace, not bitterness. That was who she was, always had been. Strong without noise, kind without condition, her husband stood by her side, no longer needing to explain anything. Everyone finally understood why he had chosen her. She wasn't just his wife. She was the foundation of everything he had built. The steady light that never asked to be seen, but had always been there. By the end of the night, guests left with, more than they came with. Not gifts or gossip, but perspective. The simple woman they once underestimated had reminded them all of something too often forgotten. Real strength isn't loud, and real love isn't flashy. And as the door closed behind the last guest, he looked at her, smiled, and whispered. "Now they know." She just nodded, her eyes soft. "I never needed them to. I only needed you to." And with that, the night ended, not with drama, but with truth.